So last week, we finished up Daniel chapter 10, which if you remember I mentioned was basically an introduction for chapter 11 and 12. This is all one big prophecy that happened. And chapter 11 here is one of the main reasons why many people try and claim that Daniel was written after the fact. And it's not, Daniel didn't really exist, and it was all written afterwards, because the prophecies in Daniel chapter 11 are very specific, and they are very, very accurate. And it's, as I studied it this last week, it's just amazing how accurate and how historical this chapter is. For Daniel, it was in the future. For us, it's in the past. And before we get into it, I want you to remember the first prophecy we had was Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And it dealt with the kingdom of Babylon, then Medo-Persia, then Greece, then Rome. Then there was the other dreams that happened that also dealt with Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And all of Daniel's prophecies work with these particular nations. And so as we move into what Daniel actually saw, well, actually, we never know what he actually saw, if you realize it. The angel that is explaining to Daniel more detail, but Daniel never says the vision. So we don't know what he actually saw. We don't know if an angel came and just told him, hey, there's all this stuff going to happen. And then Daniel prayed about it, and then another angel came and talked to him about it. We're not sure exactly what it was, how it came. Whether it was a vision, whether it was spoken word, whether it is just words dropped into his heart by God. We don't know. But we're about to go into one of the big controversial chapters on whether or not Daniel was written before it happened or after it happened. Because people have a hard time believing that this was written before any of these events took place. And I'll be honest with you, I have always been very, very confused with this particular chapter of the Bible. And so if you remember, we included verse 1 of chapter 11 in with chapter 10 because it's the continuation of a sentence where the angel says, also in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. Talking about Michael. Whenever things were going on, this angel said, I had to help Michael. Just like Michael had to help me get to you. So in chapter 11, verse 2, it starts off, it says, and now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be richer than them all. And by his strength and through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be uprooted even for others besides these. Now this should all sound familiar, because it matches the previous prophecies. 3 more kings will arise in Persia. After Cyrus, you had Cambyses, Cyrus's elder son. Then you had Guamata, or Bardia, he had 2 different names, who was an impostor claiming to be Cyrus's younger son. And Darius the Persian, who came in and assassinated the impostor and became ruler. So those are the 3 kings that were just mentioned. 3 more kings will rise. Then the 4th. The 4th is Xerxes, and we know that for a fact because Xerxes invaded Greece. He was the Persian king who invaded Greece, and it says it right here. Shall be richer by them all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up against the realm of Greece. So we can actually pinpoint who these people are. Then it says, then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion. So who is the mighty king? Well, he attacks Greece. Greece retaliates in the form of Alexander the Great. These are all names and people that we've heard of before. So this is probably why Daniel understood the vision the first time he saw it. He didn't have to have it repeated. He didn't have to ask for explanation. He knew what it meant. Who rule with great dominion, do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided towards the four winds of heaven, but not among his children, because he didn't have children. He died at 33. And so, Alexandria, can you put up that map for me? Just to help us understand what was going on. You've got to minimize this. Drag that over to the other screen.
Could have helped.
There it is. Now maximize it. Just double click right there. Wow. Well, that shrank everything, didn't it? Thank you. A little bit smaller. Okay. Or scroll up a little. There we go. Okay, so this is a map. Alexander the Great, within 7 to 8 years, conquered from here to here. All of that area. That's why he is unique in military history, because of the amount of territory he conquered in such a short amount of time. He took over the entire Middle East, along with Egypt, part of Africa, up into Greece, and this area. But his kingdom, when he died, was split up between 4 people: Antigonus, Cassander, Licinius, and Ptolemy. So Macedon and Thrace over here, by Licinius and Cassander, is not mentioned in here, other than those were 2 of the rulers. But we have the king of the north and the king of the south through the entire chapter 11. And so this gives you an idea of what's happening, just so you can see what's going on. And it says here in verse 5, it says, also the king of the south, so we're talking about Ptolemy in Egypt. The king of the south shall become strong as well as one of his princes, and he shall gain power and over him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And at the end of some years they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of her authority, and neither he nor his authority shall stand. But she shall be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in those times. But from a branch of her roots, one shall rise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with them, and prevail. And he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt, with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Now, this is why I always got confused reading this. It's because it's like the king of the north, and then his daughter, and then it's just so much information in such a little bit of thing. But the king of the south is Ptolemy, one of the people who Alexander put in charge of whenever he died. And so his dominion shall be a great dominion. He actually is Ptolemy the first is the one who actually extended past Egypt. He went and he started advancing his realm and fighting. And so he actually took over past the borders of Egypt. Temporarily, his naval forces captured Cyprus and other bases in Asia Minor. He wielded considerable influence over the Middle East for a long time. And so in other times they're restricted down here, but Ptolemy eventually came up this way and actually took over part of that. I think that might be the 310. Can you click on that by any chance? You're almost there. A little bit. There you go. Oh, that way. There you go. Click on that. He came up a little bit further here. This map is showing just the history of everything, according to actual secular history. And so he extended it, and then it starts talking about the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north. This is interesting because after the death of Ptolemy I, his son Ptolemy II continued to try and take over Seleucia, not Seleucia, but up here. And so they eventually come to a peace agreement. The north and the south come to a peace agreement. And in that agreement, Ptolemy II convinces Antiochus, who ruled over here, he's the king of the north, is Antiochus, convinced him to marry his daughter, Cleopatra. I think it was Cleopatra III. Problem with that is Antiochus was already married to someone named Bernice, who did not like being divorced. She was actually a very powerful woman, and so he divorced her, married Cleopatra II, moved and kind of banished Bernice because Bernice was not happy. And so he banished her, but she didn't like that, obviously. And so she retaliates, and she organized a successful conspiracy operating from her place of banishment. I'm sorry, her name was Cleopatra. I reversed the two names. Bernice was the daughter of Ptolemy. And she had both Bernice and her infant son, who she had just born to Antiochus, killed. Had both of them murdered. Not long afterward, the king himself was poisoned to death as well. And so she took her revenge. And so there's all this going on. She goes to the king of the north, but she doesn't retain her power. She's murdered along with her son, and eventually Antiochus is also murdered because he divorced Cleopatra. And so there's all this going on, and then in verse 7 it says, "But from a branch of her roots one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the force of the king of the north, and deal with them and prevail." Bernice's brother, the branch from her roots, not from her, but from her roots, rises up because he's in charge now. He's Ptolemy II. He builds an army, and he attacks the king of the north. And he has a lot of success. In fact, he goes and he attacks them. He's able to go in and ransack their areas, captures their gods, their articles of silver and gold, all their sacred items, and take it back down to Egypt. And so he's proclaimed this great person in Egypt because he's just conquered the king of the north. And so I'm trying to figure out how to break it down a little bit more because there's a lot of information. He didn't actually add a whole lot to his territory, though. He didn't try and keep any of the land. All he did was go in and punish them for murdering his sister and his nephew. And so he goes in, he goes in and then he sees their gods. He took them back down to Egypt, and then he made peace with the king of the north. And so there's this strange situation to where They go in, they attack, they come back, and they make peace. They said, okay, that's enough. Let's not fight anymore. And so that's kind of what they do back and forth a few times. It says, articles of silver and gold continued more than the king of the north. Then in verse 9 it says, also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. However, his sons shall stir up strife, and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. This is another foray of Seleucus II into Ptolemaic territory. Seleucus is the one that rules up here. He's the king of the north at the moment. He goes down and he actually successfully takes back the area right around here, because originally the king of the south had taken over part of that territory. Well, the king of the north takes it back, and he kind of restrains the king of the south to being only in Egypt and restricting him to right around this area. He couldn't get past the peninsula here. And so that's where they stayed. And there's no record of Seleucus ever going into Egypt proper. And so the king of the north does attack the king of the south, and he goes into his territory, but he takes back what he had taken from him. He doesn't actually try and take more than that. And so he comes in with a great force. He accomplishes this. And then in verse 11, it says, and the king of the south shall be moved with rage, and go and fight with him, with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, which shall certainly come at the end of some years with great army and much equipment. So, at this point, the king of the north is now Antiochus III. I mean, we're talking about years are going by during this time. And so, Antiochus III, who is named Megas, or Great, Antiochus the Great, next launched an expedition into Phoenicia and Palestine that ended in a serious setback at the Battle of Rapha, where he was soundly beaten by the smaller army of Ptolemy. So, King of the North comes in with this huge army and much equipment. According to history, he had brigades of war elephants and this huge, massive, something like 700,000 man army coming in. And Ptolemy had a much smaller force, yet Ptolemy won. And it was a very sound defeat. And so, of course, Ptolemy gets all proud about that, and he starts going in, and he's casting down thousands, and he's winning. But then Antiochus advanced one more time in the year 202 against Phoenicia and Palestine with battle-seasoned veterans, and pushed all the way down to the fortress of Gaza, which fell in 201. And so the king of the north comes back, and he takes him out. That's why he was given the name Megas, Antiochus the Great. He was actually a very sound military ruler. And so he comes down with all his new equipment and war people, his soldiers, and comes down. Now in verse 14 he says, now in those times many shall rise up against the king of the south. Also violent men of your people shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound and take a fortified city. Forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist, but he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no one shall be able to stand against him. He shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his power. And so he says, many shall rise up against the king of the south, also violent men of your people. So now we specifically talk about the Jews. It refers to the counteroffensive launched by the powerful general Scopas of the Egyptian forces, who was able to punish all the leaders in Jerusalem and Judah who favored the claims of Antiochus. So in Jerusalem right now, you have Jews that are favoring Antiochus and Jews that are favoring Ptolemy's reign. And so we have these two factions going on. But soon, Antiochus comes in, takes over like we had just talked about, pushes all the way back down to Gaza, and there's this severe defeat. Some of the Jewish people joined in the fighting. And he stands, and Antiochus wins, comes down into Jerusalem, and he has the power to destroy. Notice it doesn't say he does destroy. It just says he stands with the power to destroy. And he decides not to. He could have done anything he wanted. Instead, what he did is he decided to take those pro-Egyptian party leaders and get a promise from them that they will not revolt against his leadership. He pretty much threatens them and says, if you do, I'll come back. So he has the power to destroy, but he decides not to. And with a lot of the people of Jerusalem, whenever he enters, he's actually welcomed as a deliverer and a benefactor. They don't like the rule of Egypt. Remember, Egypt is a symbol in Jewish history of bondage. They don't want to be ruled by Egypt, most of them. And so when he comes to Jerusalem, they're like, yeah, we won't support them anymore. That's Egypt. We don't want to go back down to Egypt. Are you crazy? And so we have all this going on. Then in verse 17 it says, and he shall set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or before him. After this he shall turn his face to the coastlands and shall take many. But a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end, and with the reproach removed he shall turn back on him. Then he shall turn his face towards the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. And so we have another situation arise. These few hundred years in the Middle East are very turbulent. A lot of things happening. And it says, he'll give him the daughter of women to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or be with him. The clear intention of Antiochus himself was to bring the boy king Ptolemy V. So now we're all the way to Ptolemy V, who in 197 was no more than 10 years old. He was a boy king of 10 years old. And so what does Antiochus do? He gives him his daughter as a wife. And his thought process on that was, if I can get Ptolemy V to trust in my daughter, then I have a foothold in Egypt. And whenever she bears him a son, that son is of my lineage and Ptolemy's lineage. We can unite the two kingdoms, and I'll be in control of everything. The problem is, notice what it says. She shall not stand with him or before him. She goes to Egypt, she gets married to this 10-year-old boy, and immediately feels bad for him. And she sides with the Egyptians. And so, the marriage took place in 195, so I guess he was around 12 years old. Her name was Cleopatra as well. A lot of Cleopatras. A lot of Ptolemies, a lot of Antiochuses. And so Cleopatra became completely sympathetic to her husband, Ptolemy V, much to the disappointment of her father. Therefore, when she gave birth to the royal heir, who became Ptolemy VI, this gave no particular advantage or political leverage to her father. When Ptolemy V died in 181. He was only 20-some years old. He wasn't very old. Cleopatra was actually appointed queen regent because Ptolemy VI, her son, was not old enough to reign yet. She was so devoted to the Egyptian and so committed to their cause that they made her queen, even though she was from the Seleucid Empire. That's how dedicated she was, and they trusted her. So Cleopatra, once again, becomes queen of Egypt. And so all of this is going on. And then in verse 18 it says, after this he shall return his face to the coastlands and shall take many. And so soon after his victory over Scopas, he decides to send out his navy, which he has built up a good, strong navy. And they are the ruling force in the Mediterranean for a long time because of his navy. And he closed in on the island of Rhodes and took it over. They had a lot of different things going on. And the Roman government, he also brought in Hannibal. We know him from history. Hannibal attacked Rome and actually won some pretty good battles. But Rome finally beat Hannibal. They exiled him. Good old Antiochus here brings in Hannibal as an advisor. So Rome is not happy with Antiochus because they brought in his enemy. Also, Rome is just now budding. They're just starting to grow. Also, whenever he attacked the island of Rhodes, they appealed to Rome for help. And so now Rome is kind of seeing Antiochus as a rival and a problem. And so that's where Rome is just starting to be introduced into this story of history. But Antiochus wasn't about to be cowed. He thought he could take no problem with Rome. I'll deal with them when I need to. And so he just keeps on doing what he's doing. Then it says, a ruler shall bring reproach against them to an end. This is about the time the West Central Greek Confederacy of the Aetolian League sent a legislation to Antiochus asking for his assistance against Macedon and the Peloponnesians. He sent a modest naval force, but it turned out that it wasn't going to help. The Romans decided to help the other side. And so now his navy is being challenged by the Roman navy. Rome has finally decided to step in. He's suffering defeats with the Roman fleet. And so they're starting to find out that Rome, just like Daniel prophesied a long time ago, is going to take over. Sorry, I'm cutting things out so it's more interesting for you guys. He starts getting this resistance. He starts losing battles all of a sudden. And so Antiochus the Great is having issues. The Roman commander that's beating him is the brother of the guy who beat Hannibal. So we're talking about incredibly strategic people. People that are very good at military warfare and understand strategy and how to do things. And there's a point to the things I'm telling you. It all leads somewhere, I promise. And back in 202, after he compelled Antiochus to surrender, the commander dictated severe peace terms to Antiochus. Okay? So the Romans have beat Antiochus. And what they did is they decided that they gave him a limit. You can go this far. And it was the Taurus range of mountains. They told him you can't go past it. He says, furthermore, he had to surrender his entire elephant brigade, all his navy, and 20 select hostages. So they took royal prisoners. He was also obliged to pay an indemnity of 15,000 talents at once, or 20,000 talents over a set period of time. So not only did he lose, they're saying, you have to give us a lot of gold. And so with that, one of the people who were taken to Rome was Antiochus's, his second son? Yeah, his second son, who was named after him. This would be Antiochus the Fourth. We know him as Antiochus Epiphanes, who persecuted the Jews. That was in previous prophecies of Daniel. He lives in Rome for a while in his early years because he's one of the hostages. He shall turn his voice towards the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. So this is an interesting thing about Antiochus the Great. He's a great military commander. He's a great leader. He knows what he's doing. He decides to go. He's unable to meet the requirements of the money that's being extracted from him by Rome. So he goes to the temple of Bel in Elymas, and he decides he's going to rob it. But the people get so ticked off, and he brought such a small force of people that the people attack his soldiers. And in the process, they kill off Antiochus the Great. So he returns to his own land, but they don't know where he went. He dies because the people of Elymas were not about to let him sack their temple. And so they fight him off. Then in verse 20, there shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle. This is a 12-year period of the reign of Seleucus the Fourth. He decides, Seleucus the Fourth, it's only a few days. Remember, in prophecy, a lot of times days means years, especially in the book of Daniel. So it's only a few years, only about 12 years. But he decides he's going to send, he's heard a rumor, according to 2 Maccabees, there's a traitorous Jew named Simon who sent a note to Seleucus the Fourth and told him, hey, the temple of the Jerusalem has a lot of gold in it. You can pay off the Romans with it. You just got to come get it. So he sends a tax collector. And the tax collector's name was Heliodorus. Heliodorus is on his way to Jerusalem, makes it there, and all of a sudden has a dream of angels that were defending the temple. He gets so scared that he returns back to Seleucus the Fourth with nothing. He doesn't try and take anything. And so he just leaves. And so he goes back, and Seleucus IV meets an untimely end after about 12 years because Heliodorus decides to poison him. So once again, we're up in the air. But you notice verse 21. This is where it starts getting even more interesting because he says, and in his place shall arise a vile person whom they will not give the honor of royalty. Can we guess who this is? Antiochus the Fourth. Antiochus Epiphanes comes back and takes over. So he says, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue. With the force of a flood they shall be swept away from before him and be broken, and also the prince of the covenant. And after the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, and he shall come up and become strong with a small number of people. He shall enter peaceably even into the richest places of the province, and he shall do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. He shall disperse among them plunder, spoil, and riches. He shall devise his plans against the strongholds, but only for a time. He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him. Yes, those who eat the portion of his delicacies shall destroy him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. Both these kings' hearts shall be bent on evil, and they shall speak lies at the same table. But it shall not prosper, for the end will still be at the appointed time. While returning to his own land with great riches, his heart shall be moved against the holy covenant, so he shall do damage and return to his own land. There is so much that happens in these two paragraphs. He comes in peaceably. At this point, Antiochus IV is already in Seleucia. He's already in the kingdom. He's come back from Rome. But Seleucus IV has a son named Demeter. Guess where Demeter is? He's in Rome. Seleucus IV dies. Antiochus IV is there, who is uncle to Demeter, by the way. But he's in Rome. So they say, you know what? He's in Rome. He can't rule our area. So let's go ahead and make Antiochus IV the regent. Not the king, the regent. But he decides he doesn't like that idea. He decides, I think I should be king. So he starts bribing the royalty and the nobles. And they get to where they finally go ahead and make him king instead of king regent. And it's a good thing Demeter was in Rome, because that protects him from being assassinated. Later on, whenever he's older, he actually does try and take over after Antiochus IV is gone. But he doesn't do it at all while Antiochus IV is there. And so that's how he seizes the kingdom, by intrigue. Then it says, by a force of flood they shall be swept away from before him and be broken. This is interesting because he comes in and he takes up anew. Guess what he wants to do? He wants to attack Ptolemy down in Egypt. And so he's once again renewing that. But what happens is he goes down, and he's known as one to throw his people off, or throw the people he's about to attack off guard by being friendly with them. He's known as that kind of a guy. So he goes down, and he makes himself friendly with Ptolemy the VII. Ptolemy the VII ascended to the throne in 181 at the age of 6, by the way. His mother, Cleopatra, the daughter of Antiochus III, governed until her death. Then Ptolemy the VII became king at the age of 6. After he assumed power, Antiochus goes in. Ptolemy's first invasion, they keep fighting back and forth. Ptolemy attacks. His surname is Phoenicia. And so he goes in, and instead of beating Antiochus, at first he starts winning against Antiochus IV. However, it doesn't last. And he is actually captured and taken prisoner by Antiochus. And so at this turn of events, the Egyptians gave up hope of regaining their king and decided to make their his younger brother Physcon king in his place. So now we have Ptolemy Physcon ruling. I'm sorry, I said Phoenicia, it's Philometor. Philometor is the royal prisoner. That's the brother that attacked Antiochus. So what Antiochus decides to do is he wants to take over Egypt again. So he gets his royal prisoner out of prison and starts treating him like an ally. Says, hey, I want you to retake over your kingdom. I'll be your friend. I'll help you do it. Because, of course, Antiochus is going to try and take over after that. And so they're eating at the same table, and they're telling each other lies. Back and forth, just like was said. And so they go, but as soon as they go in, it says Antiochus had succeeded in penetrating Egypt itself all the way to Memphis, which he managed to capture along with the person of Philometor himself. So he takes them all. But what he ends up doing is the fact that Philometor and his brother decide, you know what? Let's become co-regents. And let's kick Antiochus out of our kingdom. So now we have another betrayal. I mean, this whole thing is betrayal after betrayal. He made Philometor and Physcon both join forces. They want to kick out Antiochus's soldiers from Egypt. So they join forces and they build up this big army. And they decide to do that. Antiochus does not like this. When he hears about it, of course, what does he do? He gets his army together and he starts marching towards Egypt. He makes it down to right around Alexandria, right in that area. I'm trying to... So, I need to include verse 29 in this as well. Because it kind of goes back and forth. The way history happened, the prophecy is not perfectly linear as far as the timeline goes, but it all happens. It says, they shall devise, in verse 25, if you notice, at the very end of it, they shall devise plans against him. That's talking about the two kings from Ptolemy. The two Ptolemies joined forces against him. In verse 29 it says, at the appointed time he shall return and go towards the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter. For ships from Cyprus shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved, and return in rage against the holy covenant and do damage. So he shall return and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant, So this is what happens. Antiochus gets mad. He starts attacking, gets all the way down to Memphis, but Alexandria. But what happens is that the Ptolemies reached out to Rome. And they said, hey, we need help. And so there is a commander by the name of, I lost his name, Roman fleet. Pompilius Lianus. Now remember, Antiochus IV was raised in Rome. He knows their strength. He knows their power. He knows that they beat his father and took him prisoner. He knows all this. Well, Pompilius comes in, meets him at Alexandria, and tells him, Rome has decided you're not allowed to attack Egypt. And Antiochus has to decide what he's going to do. In fact, Pompilius Lianus gets his staff and draws a circle around Antiochus Epiphanes and says, you need to decide what you're going to do before you're allowed to step out of that circle. He knows what's going to happen. Antiochus Epiphanes knows that he can't beat Rome, because Rome at this point in history is an immense, strong, battle-hardy nation. And so he decides, okay, fine, I won't attack Egypt. And he's in a rage. And so he goes back towards his own land. But what's really interesting is that early in Antiochus Epiphanes' reign, he was approached by a guy named Jason, who was a Jew that was in the high priest's family. And he does something really stupid, Jason does. He goes to Antiochus and he says, I will support you and I will give you money if you remove the high priest and make me high priest in his place. This is the first time where the secular government has control over Yahweh's priesthood. This is the first time in history since the time Moses and God established the priesthood. And so Antiochus don't care. He says, yeah, give me money. He removes the guy, the rightful high priest, whose name was Onias, from being high priest. Well, later on, not long after that, there was another guy named Menelaus, who was Jason's brother. And he says, well, if you can give him money, I can give him money. So he goes to Antiochus and says, hey, if you remove Jason, I'll give you more money. In fact, what I'll do, Menelaus decides, what I'll do is if you make me high priest, I will take the golden articles out of the temple and give them to you. Antiochus doesn't care which person is high priest. So he goes, okay, and he removes Jason, makes Menelaus high priest. The problem is that Onias is still alive. He's still in the temple working. He's the rightful high priest. He's still there. And Menelaus starts taking things out of the temple. Well, he gets ticked off. And he starts telling Menelaus that he's wrong, that he's ungodly, that he shouldn't be doing this, that he can't give this to a pagan king. Menelaus gets mad and has his brother, name starts with an L, I don't remember what it was, has it kill Onias. The people of Jerusalem get ticked off at that point. They get upset and they decide, we don't like Menelaus. What we're going to do, we're going to try and do this in a way that doesn't upset anyone. We'll get Antiochus to remove Menelaus. So they send representatives over to Antiochus to condemn Menelaus. Well, Menelaus has a friend who's a courtier in the court of Antiochus. And that guy convinces Antiochus to just murder the representative sent from Jerusalem. So instead of Menelaus getting punished for what he did, all of the representatives die. And so that's the situation in Jerusalem at this point. But what happens is Jason hears that over in Alexandria, they don't turn Antiochus away, they kill him. That's what Jason hears, who's still alive, by the way. So he decides, hey, if Antiochus is gone, then what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to raise up an army and I'm going to take over Jerusalem myself. So he gets 1,000 armed supporters. They go in, they massacre men, women, children. They don't care who they're killing. They take Menelaus. Ironically, they don't kill Menelaus. What they do is they shut him up in prison in the citadel in Jerusalem. And they kill off all these other people. He has taken the city and he is in control now. Jason rules Jerusalem. Well, Antiochus is ticked off because he was just turned back by the Romans at Alexandria. He hears that Jason has taken over the city of Jerusalem without him. So what does he do? He decides that on the Sabbath day, as we read in previous prophecies, he's going to go ahead and go in and destroy Jason. So he goes in, and like it says, he shall do damage and return to his own land. At the appointed time he shall return and go to the south, not like former times, for the ship from Cyrus shall come against him. That's Pompilius Leanus from Rome. Therefore he shall be grieved and return in a rage against the holy covenant and do damage. He comes to Jerusalem, and he's so ticked off that he attacks on the Sabbath so that the Jews won't be ready for it. He goes in, he massacres a bunch of people, he defiles the temple by removing all of the holy articles. He sets up a statue of Zeus in its place and sacrifices a pig to the new statue of Zeus. Of course, we know that that idol is called the abomination of desolation by the Jews. He will show regard for those who forsake the Holy Covenant, those who are supporting him. Guess who that is? Menelaus. Menelaus lets him take everything out of the temple. He lets him set up the idol of Zeus. I mean, this is all going on. Verse 32. Verse 31. And forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices, and place there the abomination of desolation, the statue of Zeus. Those who do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt with flattery, talking about Menelaus and his followers. And the people who know their God, but the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. And of those people who understand, shall instruct many. Yet for many days they shall fall by sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. Now when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help, but many shall join with them by intrigue. And some of those of understanding shall fall, to refine them, purify them, make them white, until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. This is interesting because this is all about the revolt by the Maccabees. They go and they're intimidated. What was his name? Matthias was the father of 5 sons. One of them being Judas Maccabeus. He's the first one who actually received the title Maccabeus, which is hammer. They called him the hammer. And so what happens is they go in, he's causing all these problems. They take away the daily sacrifices. I think it's like 3 years later, the Maccabees take over. And they start fighting back. And they are very, very strict about, we need revival. We need to follow the law of Moses. We need to do this. And so they go in and they start fighting with with Antiochus's armies, and they're actually winning. They're much smaller forces, not trained in battle, and yet they're winning. And that's what happens. They keep going. Out of the Maccabees and the people who are very strongly, we have to follow the law, guess what comes out of those? The Pharisees and the Sadducees. That's where they originate. And so we see the extreme following of the Mosaic law and the Levitical law. And many of these people, before they start fighting, they start going out into the surrounding region and telling people, we need to stand up against this. We need to follow the law of Moses. And so they're creating this revival in the land. And many of them, they're killed by the sword. They start burning their fields, burning their cities, start destroying them. And eventually, they start unifying and become the army of the Jewish people. And they start fighting, and some of the exploits they have are incredible. There's one of I forget which brother it was, but Antiochus has his elephants coming and attacking him. He literally kills an elephant by stabbing it in the chest with a sword. It falls and crushes him to death, but they win the battle because Antiochus' army sees their elephants start falling, and they're like, let's get out of here, these guys are going to kill us all. And they retreat. I mean, it's amazing what God did through the Maccabees. And they start taking them, and they start moving in this area, and there's just so much information. I need to start wrapping it up because we're already pretty deep into time here. But the Maccabees start their revolt against Antiochus Epiphanes' reign. And they start revolting. And they start criticizing their countrymen. Because a lot of the Jewish people at this point are starting to reject God's law, and they start following the secular people. In fact, there is record of a Hellenistic or a Greek gymnasium being built in the Jerusalem area, and the Jews, wanting to be more like the Gentiles they're with, had surgical procedures to make it look like they didn't have circumcision. Because in a Greek gymnasium, everyone works out in the nude. And they didn't want to be singled out. That's how bad it got. They were trying to reverse the sign of the covenant of God, so they couldn't be identified like that. Well, the Maccabees not only attacked Antiochus and them, but the people who were that bad, they started killing off. And so people started joining them by intrigue, lying to them. Yeah, we're with you. We don't want to die. We'll do what you say. But they weren't really with them. And so that's what it's talking about. We're going to go ahead and pause there, and we'll pick it back up in 33 or 36 next week. But do you see how accurate this prophecy is in history? How people could look at it and go, there's no way this was written before it happened. There's just no way. There were too many battles, too many human decisions made for this to be written beforehand. There's no way that someone could have predicted with this much accuracy. But it proves that God knows the end from the beginning. And the reason he's telling us this isn't just for the historical standpoint of it. It's because it all leads into what's going to happen once again in the end times. That's why John, in the book of Revelation, talks about things that sound a lot like this. Because it's all going to start happening again as the Antichrist of the end time comes in. And that's brought a little bit more in at the end of this chapter. And so, once again, we'll talk about that. It's hard for me to stop. And so, let's go ahead and close out in prayer. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you for your word. Thank you that you do know the end from the beginning. Lord, you know when it's the perfect time to come back. You know when it's the perfect time to speak into our individual hearts. You know the perfect time for everything, whether it's a major world event or it's a personal spiritual event. Lord, I pray that you would help us to rely on you. Help us to depend on you and trust in you in everything, Father, because we know that you have the perfect knowledge and that we can trust you because you want good for us. You're for us, Lord. You're not against us. You want to bless us and prosper us, Lord God. And I pray that we would learn to let go of more of the things we hold on to and just let you have them, and we can hold on to you, because when we hold on to you, we have everything we could ever possibly need. Father, bless this week. May it be a good week where we follow you and do the things you want us to. May we go from here and be good witnesses everywhere we go and in everything we do. Father, and may we come back safely next week. In Jesus' name we pray.